Hey, Whitney, have you noticed that the old ways of working aren't working anymore?
Yes, Iris. Let's talk about it. I'm Whitney.
And I'm Iris. We are two elite executive coaches / moms / recovering Olympians. We found that we had to unlearn so much of what we were taught as elite athletes and women to gain more freedom and health.
And we've seen our clients facing the same dilemmas. As coaches, we get this front row view of high-performing humans. And we realize we're all trying to make the best out of our potential, both at work and at home.
We will take you behind the curtain and share with you how we untrain our clients and ourselves from toxic mindsets and habits. We will offer you the frameworks and tools to live and work with more ease and joy.
Welcome to Untrained.
Hi, Whitney.
Good morning, Iris.
Welcome to everyone to Untrained, our podcast. And today we're going to be, talking about ourselves, which is not something we do very often as coaches, right?
Right. We're going to introduce ourselves and share our stories and how this came to be.
So I think we drew straws and you were going to interview me first.
No, I asked you to go first. And I'm going to interject if I feel like you miss anything that I think is important. But we want to introduce ourselves and our path to coaching and our path to this podcast. So Iris, say a little bit about the path for you to coaching, because nobody graduates from college in coaching and starts coaching. Everybody arrives here from a little bit of a meandering path. So what was yours?
What was my meandering path and journey?
Yes.
The standard practiced answer I have for clients is I started coaching 5 years ago. One of my friends who is someone that you taught to row and who is one of the most decorated Olympians and rowers at Harvard, she is Karin Davies. We were going on a plane trip over to Colorado Springs for an Olympic alumni meeting. And I said, I'm not really sure what I want to do next. And she said, you know what? I have a friend of mine. So Karin Davies said, I have a friend of mine, Sarah Milby. She's starting a company called Valor Performance, and she's looking for Olympians to learn how to coach and become coaches. And I thought, oh my gosh, that'd be great. And so around 2017, I started the coaching journey. I learned under Dr. Adam Naylor. And a lot of people in our circles know him. He's a great teacher. And I learned from you. And eventually I got an ICF certification, and combining my MBA and ICF certification, I started coaching. But that's the canned response, Whitney. That's the super canned response. Like, how do I? So the non-canned response is that I've basically.
Can I ask you a question? What lit up in you so that you went, 5 years ago, you were like, what's coaching? And then you ended up VP of coaching for Valor and pretty much dedicating your life to it now and on fire. So what lit up in you?
Well, I felt like all the skill sets that I randomly have and unrandomly have all kind of came together with coaching. So I've always loved teaching. Someone once told me that. They said, oh, Iris, you're a teacher. You're a natural teacher. You like to coach fencing. Even as a kid, after learning fencing for a while at 11, I would start teaching kids. I've always enjoyed it. So one of my skills that I never knew I had until someone pointed out is you really like teaching. Coaching isn't teaching, but you still need a lot of these listening skills. You need a lot of empathy skills to be a good teacher. So I think that's part of it. And also, I've always been interested. One of the things that someone said to me was, wow, Iris, I can't ever have just a superficial conversation with you. I really need to focus when I have conversations with you. And that's how I've always been. I've always been very curious about the world, about life, and wanting to understand how people are living and how they're dealing with the same issues. So human issues are human issues. We all deal with some level of confidence issues. We have some fears. We have all of these things as human beings and part of the human experience. And I always felt it was so interesting. And the way I dealt with it was, well, I can't be the only one thinking about these things, or I can't be the only one kind of going through these things. There's got to be some tools. There's got to be other people out there. So even at a young age, we'll be sitting at a party and I'm asking people like, what is your deepest fear about this? And what do you think about that? And I think it's just a part of me. It's always how I've been. So when I found coaching, it very much was this link between teaching and also this piece of empathy and listening that came together as these were skill sets that you needed to be a really good coach. And I think the other piece of it was I'm definitely a caretaker. I love to be able to listen and to help. A huge part of my upbringing is in the Chinese culture, and a lot of it is very community-based and community-oriented. There's not a lot of things you have to do on your own. We do everything as a family, as a group, as a unit. And so I felt like even in a one-on-one circumstance, I could support someone. I could be part of their clan, their family, their community. And in that moment, I can help you on the journey, right? So someone can help you a little bit and walk through. So you didn't have to feel alone. So that actually, I think, was the deepest meaning for me and the most meaningful thing.
Yeah, there's a trailhead here I want to take advantage of. So you talk about being alone, you talk about not being alone and your desire to help people not feel alone. Speak a little bit about performance and the experience of having performed at that elite level that you performed at for so many years. Fencing Hall of Fame, Olympics, injuries, PTSD, there was a lot of things that you went through that were lonely. So speak to me a little bit about performance, your experience of high performing and how it shapes your desire to coach and your coaching.
Well, that's a really complex question for me to answer.
I gave you a big one.
You gave me a big one, and I'm like, man, there's like three or four
take a part of it.
points.
Which pull a thread. What thread do you want to start with? I did overwhelm you.
Well, I think a part of it was something we talk about very deeply is all the things that we were taught growing up to become a successful person. You have to grind through it no matter how you feel. Wake up, get to the gym, do it faster, harder, stronger, right? So Sidious Altius Fortius was a blog I used to write when I was training for the Olympic Games. And that means faster, higher, stronger, right? The motto of the Olympic Games. And so much of it was, these are all the principles of being successful. And it was hard for me because I'm a very anxious person by design through my mother and also just through, which I'll get into, is the coaching that I had. I was very, very anxious. I was very afraid to lose. So all of these ways to be successful helped in some ways, but when things got really very difficult, I lacked the resilience that I really needed. And that's hard. That's interesting for me to say only because I've won all these things. But the sustainability of that winning really was challenged. And I did have a lot of sports psychologists. I worked with a ton that tried to help me with some of these pieces. But it was very hard for me to trust them when they said, you need to rest. And one of the things I was defined by was someone bought me this T-shirt of "I practice while you sleep." That was an Adidas shirt that I wore in the 1990s. That was a lucky T-shirt I had. And so I think that really defines who I am. And people say you're just extremely persistent. But the sports psychologists, on the other hand, would help me, would try to help me say, they would say, you need to rest and recover. And I thought, that's super weak. We don't do that. We just keep training. You got to keep working. So I think I had a lot of sports psychologists in the performance space. However, I don't think I was at the moment able to really listen to those things. And I can hear it in my clients. You and I are just like nodding, like we can hear it in our clients too.
Well, and that speaks to a later podcast, performance as safety. If it fundamentally does not feel safe to slow down, to rest, to take the foot off the gas, why are you going to?
There's no reason for it.
You're going to fight it.
You're going to fight it. So the other piece of it and the other side, the other string I'll pull in something and something I'm sharing which I don't share very lightly because not everyone feels, excuse me, the same way about the coach that I had. So I share my experience with a coach that was verbally and emotionally abusive. He would teach us through fear and through tactics of violence and fear. And, it was hard. It was abusive. And I don't think until my 30s did I really ever name that it was an abusive relationship. So I learned the wrong way to teach people of if someone's not getting it right, just yell at them or curse at them or hit them until they get it and get it right.
And we internalize these voices.
And you internalize these voices. And so as I grew up, I retired from fencing. I internalized that. And so there are instances I can now look back in my career and elsewhere where a lot of this PTSD will come up. So PTSD is another thing that is part of me that you and I talk about a lot, that I got from the performance piece of it as well. So, that is also why I come to coaching as well, is I've kind of learned the ways in which we've learned, and I've learned how to untrain those things. And now I want to be able to help others get to that pathway of more ease. To your point, you use that word ease a lot, more peace, and also greater expansion. Because I feel like once I learned these tools and untrained, I feel a sense of freedom and expansion that I never had. So I think for me, that the purpose of this podcast, the purpose of my coaching is, how can I help people and get them some tools so they feel more expansive, they feel more ease, that they can learn, that they can change, they can continue to adapt, they can continue to grow.
And you also love it. When we have a great call or a great week, we're lit up by our clients, by the journey, by the process.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. Is one of the biggest things for me is when a client shares a piece of their lives with me. A client will send me a picture of their kid that was just born. Or the client will say, I did a great job. I'm getting very emotional around it, but I did a great job at this meeting. Or I heard your voice in my head and I drew a boundary and said no. And for me, if I can just help, I see it as, I'm a very visual person, as you know, is if I can light somebody's light so they can feel more lit up and happy, not just happy, but
connected
just lit
to
up.
themselves.
Yes.
Connected to themselves.
Connected to themselves. Then that way they spread it on, right? So it's kind of like wildfire. And I feel like I can help ignite or be a part of that. The good kind, the good wildfire. So that's that. You're absolutely right. We do love it. We do love our clients, and we do love being part of their lives and part of their journeys. Mm-hmm. Can I turn the tables to you?
You may.
So tell me about your journey to coaching and do you have a moment of like, this is it?
Well, no, it was an evolution. I think my path to coaching began. It's hard to separate the athletic and the coaching pathway. I discovered rowing in college. I was what's called a walk-on, meaning I had never rowed before. Rowing's a unique sport in that you can take a lot of sort of previous endurance and passion and grit and combine them, and somebody can end up being pretty good at rowing. So that was me. But what hooked me, not only was that I was good at it, but was this sense of belonging that was so compelling that I had never experienced in that way. Particularly when you go to college and you're sort of off on your own, and you realize like if you didn't get up one morning, who would notice? And then you feel sort of supported and held somewhere. And I was just hooked. And I loved it and I needed it. And again, this is what we're going to talk about later. But to belong, I had to perform and I had to work. And so this sort of efforting and belonging were started to get entwined. When I retired from rowing, I went into counseling. That sort of seemed like the next thing. I mean, I, like you, I would be at the World Championships and I was always asking those questions like, so why did the Italians win when they're smoking after, after their race? And
They smoked
like,
in your
what
sport
is it?
too?
Yeah, they would literally like start smoking.
Same in
so
fencing.
What is it? Is it? Yeah. You're like, why does it work for them? What is it about like this team? They all look equally strong and powerful and scary. Like, why is this team winning routinely and this team isn't? Like, what is going on here? I'm so curious. And I was equally curious, like, about my own teammates. Like, wow, we all have this similarity, or we all have this challenge, or we all have this anxiety. Like, is that part of what makes us good? Is there, is it not only skills, but also like holes in us that make us drive us to do this sport? So I was always really curious about that. Psychology seemed like a next step. Went into psychology. That was sort of my path to coaching. I think people come in either through the business door or the psychology door. For me, it was the psychology door. And I did a lot of groups. But I always found when I was in a room alone with somebody, doing the individual work, like there wasn't enough forward movement. There wasn't enough like, how do we get to our best? It was looking back. It was sort of getting to baseline. And there was something really missing for me there. So way back, in the early 2000s, before coaching was a thing, I hung my coaching shingle and I was, doing my counseling and working with teams and coaching. That wasn't quite performance coaching, but, so I was starting it early on because it just felt like a really good fit, because it involves sort of the depth of psychology, but that like fire and excitement of what's ahead and how do we be our best. And that's the combination that lit me up. And I think there's always that belonging piece. Like when you're coaching, you're deeply connected to someone, and that feels good to me.
I think one time we need to do a podcast around the difference between coaching and counseling and getting therapy.
Yeah.
Coaching and therapy, which we will. I've had you do that video anyways. So,
and I will say one other thing that there's a lot, but like I too, sort of there in the journey, like there's I call it my closet moment. Like in all the great books, it's either a closet moment or a bathroom moment. People are either crying in the closet or they're crying in the bathroom floor. I'm a closet crier, not a bathroom floor crier. But I was so sad and so, anxious, depressed, all the things. And I was like, but I did it. I went to the good school. I was successful at the sport. At times I've been, achieved the thinness thing through great measure. Like none of it amounted to happiness. And that was the training manual I was handed. And it's crap. But where's the other training manual, right? Like this didn't work. And it took me another 20 years to really like unravel the lousy training manual and figure out there was another one. So speaking to, and again, like I think as athletes, we have hours and hours of physical experience of teaching our bodies to push, teaching our bodies that that pushing and overriding what's our impulses and instincts is good. And that takes a lot of undoing. And I'm still undoing it. I'm helping my clients undo it. We are here today. Like why I want to do the podcast is because, so often I finish my coaching calls and I'm like, oh, that was such a good nugget. And it only emerged because I was in this conversation and I want to share it because I know other people would benefit from it and struggle with the same thing. And this is the best, most alive, most joyful forum for sharing and for me, because it's fun to do it with you. And I don't like to do things alone. I like to be in team and partnership. So, this is ideal.
So let's talk about, let's expand on that of how we met and how
our origin
story. The dynamic duo origin story for the audience so they know where we're coming from. So I mentioned Valor, and in 2017 when I joined, there was a woman named Whitney Otto who then reached out to me and then started, for me, you became a mentor, someone I could go to. And I think that's so important for someone who's starting off their coaching career, is you do so much of it one-on-one with a client that at the end I turn off Zoom and I'm like, oh my God, I gotta talk to someone about this, or maybe there's some other tools or another way I can look at this so that we can find different pathways. So I would often call you, or we would talk to each other. So I think it started in that way.
Well, it started there, and I'm going to say a couple things about that. Well, first of all, I was like, ooh, that lady. I want to be friends with that lady. That lady's special. And then we ended up, we both had roles where we were doing these updates for the coaches. And so we had to make these videos. Well, we decided to make videos. We thought it'd be more fun, and we'd offer the announcements and whatever. And it was fun. And there was like a chemistry there. And so that's where we first thought, maybe we could turn this into a podcast. But I want to say something for me that's important about why this works and why this is the right forum for sharing the teachings, is that, as we discuss it, we will talk about a lot of the cultures and situations and leaders we work for that didn't feel safe. We did not feel safe there. And that made it, when you don't feel safe, you don't have as many choices for how to show up, right? And that's very often where that performance kicks in. And you and I have had a relationship over years of working together where I've failed you, I've disappointed you, and I know how you respond. So there's a lot of, and we've shared a lot. We've been vulnerable with one another. I know how you handle my vulnerability, right? So there's a safety in our relationship, which is key and really important when it comes to creating a forum and a project to share the message and the teachings and the things that we want to share. So that's for me, a big part of our origin story is the safety inherent within the relationship that is the foundation for all of it.
I'm going to get emotional. I think one of the things that someone said, we just published pushed out one of our podcasts, and someone said to me, it's very clear you both have a really good relationship. And there is a chemistry. I've done commentary, I've done other things with other people, but it's nothing like this. And so when you listen to us, it really is the foundation of us is the trust and the safety. And I'm hoping that also, I didn't think about that until now, is that we can also model that type of relationship, that we can leave room for each other. We can also push each other, push our thoughts, or, support each other as we both are trying. And I'll give an example.
Yeah, we will coach each other very often. Just last night, Iris was like, oh, it's corporate Whitney. I'm like, what do you mean it's corporate Whitney? She's like, it's corporate Whitney. I'm like, I'm like, damn it, she knows me too well. I'm like, how do I get out of corporate Whitney? Like when I'm stressed, corporate Whitney.
Corporate Whitney likes to be very boxed up. And then what's the next thing? What are we doing next? Let's stay organized. And I'm like,
That's why I put my leopard print on, trying to uncorporate myself.
Yeah, and you've coached me out of, and we've been in this scenario where, even the intro, I was struggling through the intro. You
had PTSD come up.
I had PTSD trigger when I feel like need to do something a certain way and I'm not doing it. I blank out. I completely retreat. I'm disappearing in the moment or freezing.
You disappear. Yeah, that's a good. And then I try and create more safety for you and invite you back.
So maybe that is where we begin, is this podcast. Hopefully part of it is showing people how this can work, how positive relationships can provide safety, and how you can help hold each other up and push each other to be better and to support them. So that is a part of this.
Well, and I think at the end of the day, it's creating that relationship within yourself. So, the relationship we created within ourselves was the training we had was the jerky coach or the whatever person gaslighting human in front of us, punitively, right? And then we effort to respond. And I've had to do a lot of work on creating a part in me that has a compassion, right? When the voice when I disappoint someone or I screw up and I have the voice that goes, I hate you. Like, how do I respond? And how do I summon a very different voice to address the parts of me that are feeling upset. So it's the relationship here and it's the relationship inside that we're hoping to give you some tips and tools and stories to cultivate, because it's a game changer.
Oh, it's a game changer. If you were to summarize how it's changed for you, what would you say? All the work that you've
I
put
was just
in.
thinking last night, I was leading a group, and I was putting people into breakout rooms, and I was kind of messed something up, and this is very like high level group. And in the past, I would have like, my stomach would have been knots, the self talk would have been like rampant, but I was like, that was uncomfortable. Moving on, like the way I was able to handle that, a couple of years ago, like it would have been a very different story, and there would have been a lot more effort and emotion that summoned within me to respond to that failure, right? And it's just, I just have a lot more compassion and ease and love. Like I want to keep coming back to love. Like, not that I want to not get better at breakout rooms, but I don't need to slay myself over it.
The way I've been approaching it is the realization that even though people see me as an Olympian and they think, oh, she's very successful, so she's very resilient, and I realized that everyone else was ascribing resilience to me, and I realized I had no resilience. To your point, when something would happen or I would make a mistake, it was as if the bottom would drop out from my world, and it would affect my personal relationships. It would affect my relationship to my kids, the way that I would just move through the world, and I would perseverate on that mistake.
Perseverating.
Yes. And you would stay with it, and then you would keep that emotion. And I think you're absolutely right. One of the biggest values I have is freedom, and doing the work. And it is work, and it's work every day, it's given me freedom of choice. Okay, I could perseverate, but I also have other pathways now.
Yeah.
I could just walk away from it and say, okay, what did I learn? And then, do different pathway.
And I think that we never would have been able to have our mantra, which is that we say to each other often, well, you say to me more than I say to you, but 6.5, 6.5. Because our goal is not to be a 10 on this in terms of how we perform and all the things related to the podcast, because we would never share it or get it out the door. Our goal is a 6.5. And if we can hold ourselves to a 6.5, then we can show up.
Yes, the perfectionism can definitely keep us from showing up. So I think this is a good place where hopefully you've learned something more about us and, how our origin story, as you say, and what we really want from the podcast and hope for all of you. We just wanted to give you some information. And as this podcast moves forward, hopefully you'll learn more about us, and hopefully we'll learn more about others too.
Yeah, we want to bring people in. Absolutely. So we've learned how to perform without beating ourselves up in the process, and we want to share more of that with the world. Keep on training.